one of the main defenses that people make to show or argue that we had to have gone to the moon. And they often say that there would have been so many people involved in the conspiracy, it would have been impossible to keep it quiet. The only people who would have known about the hoax would have been those on a need-to-know basis, and that would have been very few people. You have your astronauts, you have the people filming everything and building the locations, and you have the people authorizing it, and that's it. Everybody else would have been doing their one task in the line and sequence of events that they were responsible for. And this segues into another defense made by people who believe we went to the moon, and that is, why didn't NASA have them do things over after they made mistakes? And the reason for that is that this was live, and not everybody was in on it. And those hundreds of people you see at Mission Control, they're not in on it. You got the surgeons, they're monitoring the heart rate. You have the data guys, they're monitoring whatever is coming in on their feed. And everybody is looking at a live event, and all over the world, people are monitoring a live event. So there were no do-overs.
Here again, from the same mission, Apollo 16, we have an astronaut who is about to get up.
Give me a hand. Okay, here we go.
Let me give you a hand, he says.
There goes bag. There goes another bag. Bag. Coming.
Look at it again. The astronaut is getting up with the wire taking the weight, relieving him of 5/6 of the Earth's gravity. A magic trick? No, just the help of a wireman. This is a slow motion jump that would have been seen live on TV. And here it is at normal speed. The well-rehearsed, pre-recorded material was apparently slowed down by 50% when we saw it on TV. And yes, we've done the necessary work to establish that percentage.
Good morning, NASA headquarters. How may I direct your call?
I'm inquiring about moonstones, because I've heard something about moonstones.
No, we don't have moonstones, sir.
So no astronauts brought any stones back to Earth from the moon?
No, we've never had any.
$308,000 this moon rock was valued. That was given by Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong to the Dutch Prime Minister. Only it's petrified wood. They've done tests on it. Oh, we'll keep it as a curiosity. But yeah, we brought this rock from the moon. Not from the moon at all.
The moon is mysterious. You know, we only see one side of it. We never see the other side. It never moves, not even 1/2 of a degree. From thousands of years, it's the exact same side. It doesn't spin, and they say it's caught in a synchronous orbit. But from all...
Is that the same for the sun?
The sun, it's just a bright light. You can't tell what the hell's going on. But with the moon, we only see the one side. Doesn't make any sense. Even before I got into flat earth, for the last 10 years, the moon never made sense to me. I'm like, how? Because then when you pay attention to it, you're like, okay, during the crescent moon, okay, it makes sense that because I mean, the conspiracy theory is that the light coming from the moon is not a reflection of the sun. The conspiracy theory is the light that the moon actually gives off its own light. It's its own luminary. It's not, it wouldn't be bright if it wouldn't reflect light like that. That's the conspiracy theory. And then also they're saying they're measuring the light of the moon, the temperature, and the sun obviously is warmer in the light than it is in the shade. But moonlight, according to the conspiracy theory, is colder in the light than in the shade. It's warmer in the shade. So what they're saying is that the moonlight is totally different light than the sunlight. A mystery. It doesn't rotate, and we only see, no matter where you are in the world,
there's societies.
It's the same face.
You can, sound won't travel in a vacuum, so there you are outside, and you could be hitting something, no sound at all.
In space, since there's no atmosphere, there's no air, if you bang on something when you're doing your spacewalk, you will not be able to hear that.
And this leads us to the dilemma of our final segment. All modern astronauts, such as Piers Sellers and Mike Massimino, claim to hear absolutely nothing when they're out on the International Space Station in the vacuum, banging away with metal tools and objects, whereas during the Apollo missions, all kinds of sounds have been recorded that should not be possible if they are on the moon in the vacuum of space. So what you just saw appears to be a smoking gun. That scene, which was broadcast live to the world during Apollo 15, shows astronaut James Irwin. He takes this cord or band off of a canister, and those canisters are in the mesa table, which Irwin is standing in front of. He unravels the cord, which has two metallic locks at the end of it, pictured here. They look like bullets. He takes that off, he unravels it, he reaches back with his right hand, and he throws the cord away. Let's take another look at it. So the argument has been made for the hammering that the sound is coming through the glove and it's miraculously getting into the microphones. But we don't have to deal with that argument because James Irwin releases the object and it hits the ship and he's not touching it, and that sound is picked up by the microphone inside the astronaut's helmet. And you can always tell that that's the microphone in play because you will always hear the sound of the suit air supply system in the background whenever the astronaut is transmitting, and you will hear this sound remain on for a split second after the astronaut stops transmitting.
You're saying
I'm just saying I don't trust it.
Breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers.
That when examined, these images suggest that man never went to the moon at all. This famous scene of man taking his first steps on the lunar surface is one of the most recognizable in history. But why are such important images so grainy and hard to see?
And we're getting a picture on the TV. You got a good picture, huh?
NASA claims it's the result of 1960s technology.
NASA orchestrated the hoax in a very unique way, through television. They had one picture which they completely controlled, black and white, grainy, that convinced everybody we were on the moon. We had no reason to doubt it. They had complete reins over the pictures, over the sound. I mean, sad to say, it was easier than people believe.
Evidence suggesting that these images were staged.
It's absolutely unreal.
Although it appears that the astronauts are moving in the moon's gravity, which is 1/6 that of the Earth, Percy notes that when the speed of the film is doubled, the astronauts appear to be running as if in Earth's gravity. Also, when the footage of the lunar rover is doubled in speed, it looks as if it's driving here on Earth. If there is no air or wind on the moon, why is this American flag waving?
The fact that the flag flaps on the moon where there's no atmosphere means that there must have been a little blast of wind out in Area 51 where they shot this. The pictures that we see that allegedly were taken on the moon are absolutely perfect.
But with closer examination, Casing says flaws begin to emerge.
Unfortunately, errors were made which are now being discovered.
Point out that lighting is a major flaw in the lunar photos. Case in point, on the moon, the astronauts' only source of light was the sun.
They had no extra lighting, no flashes or things like that.
Yet in this photograph from Apollo 14, the shadows are cast in different directions, suggesting multiple light sources.
The shadows cast by the rocks in the foreground should have been east-west, like the LEM shadows.
And in this photo from Apollo 17, again the shadows are pointing in different directions.
Outside in sunlight, shadows always run parallel with one another, so the shadows will never intersect.
Conspiracy theorists say it's not just the shadows that indicate the use of additional lights, but what has been photographed in the shadows. For example, here's an astronaut who descends into a huge shadow cast by the lunar module. Yet his entire body is still visible. How is it that he is not shrouded in darkness? Here's the same maneuver from another Apollo mission. Again, the astronaut is brightly lit in what is obviously dark shadow. And in this picture, the sun is directly behind the astronaut. His figure should be a silhouette. Yet even the smallest characteristics of his suit are recognizable.
It seems like he's standing in the spotlight. And I can't explain that. That escapes me. Why?
And finally, in this picture with the sun behind the lunar module, the front of the craft is clearly visible. The words United States are crisp and clear. How could these backlit pictures be so detailed?
It's because there's more than one light source, which means they're not on the moon.
But NASA simply dismisses these arguments. But the questions continue. Why do some of these images shot at different times and different places appear to have identical backgrounds? These two photos seem to have the same mountain backdrop, yet the lunar module is only present in one of them. Seemingly impossible, since the LEM never moved and its base remained even after the mission.
What a ride, what a ride.
Some suggest the same artificial backdrop was used when shooting two entirely separate pictures. Background discrepancies are also apparent in the lunar video.
The best evidence are some pictorial anomalies in the photographic record of the trip to the moon. There is one for Apollo 16 where the same shot, the same hill, appears in 2 different days.
This tape was shot on what was reported to be the first of Apollo 16's lunar excursions.
But it couldn't pick a better spot.
And this video was from the next day at a different location.
It is the most beautiful sight.
NASA claims the second location was 2.5 miles away. But when one video is superimposed over the other, the locations appear identical. Even closer examination of the photos suggests evidence of doctoring. For reference, crosshairs were permanently etched into the lunar cameras, so they would have to appear on top of every image. But in this photo, a crosshair is behind a part of the lunar rover.
This situation is impossible and has to be the result of technical manipulation and doctoring of the image.
And in this photo from Apollo 11, the equipment in the foreground is covering the crosshair, not behind it. And in another from Apollo 12, the American flag is covering one crosshair and the astronaut is covering the other. When presented with these questionable photos and videos,
It's absolutely unreal.
insist that Apollo was a hoax.
When I looked at all the pictures and all the footage, I'm absolutely convinced, I bet my life on it, that we didn't go to the moon. I know for a fact that we didn't.
Astronauts moving in slow motion is another hallmark of the Apollo TV footage. There is no evidence at all of any astronaut making a leap or a jump anywhere near a height commensurate with 1/6G possibilities. But if they were actually simulating EVAs on Earth, they would then need help with their bulky heavyweight suits and backpacks in order to achieve the visual effect of moving around easily in lunar gravity. So enter wire supports. This is a tried and tested way of relieving weight from performers, or even flying an actor. Of course, confirmation that wires were used is in the detail. Here in this Apollo 14 footage, you can see a ping, a momentary glint. And again, run slowly. And once more. There are other examples too. This one is from Apollo 17 during the flag scene. You can see the ping at the top of the frame. In this footage from Apollo 16, we have telltale evidence of a slightly floating or dangling effect at the jump salute location. It's as if the weight is being taken off the astronaut's feet just a second or so too soon. Compare that sequence with an obvious rehearsal rig. The dangling effect is very evident. And here again, from the same mission, Apollo 16, we have an astronaut who is about to get up.
Okay, here we go.
Let me give you a hand, he says.
There goes bag. There goes another bag. Bag. Coming.
Look at it again. The astronaut is getting up with the wire taking the weight, relieving him of 5/6 of the Earth's gravity. A magic trick? No, just the help of a wireman. This is a slow motion jump that would have been seen live on TV. And here it is at normal speed. The well-rehearsed, pre-recorded material was apparently slowed down by 50% when we saw it on TV. And yes, we've done the necessary work to establish that percentage.
Okay, I don't claim to have found the wires, but I do think I found the attachments to the wires. This is the OPS, oxygen purge system. The arrows are pointing at those little bars there. Those bars were originally designed to carry a bag on them, but the only mission they actually used the bag was Apollo 12. And here you can see the strap from the bag attaches to the top of the backpack on that bar. And even though they didn't use use that bar for anything else on later missions, the bar remained part of the equipment. What is not part of the equipment and has never been spotted before, as far as my research has revealed, is that there are little tiny rings that hang out of that bar compartment. And I could only spot these in this one clip from Apollo 16 at Station 5. But in this clip, you can see them quite clearly, and you can see them dangling, and you can see the shadow that they make. And there is no official explanation for those rings. And this in a mission that has been analyzed to the nines. No technical manual, no internet discussion, no mission report mentions these rings. And if there were wires carrying the astronauts around and making them do all these herky-jerky moments and jump up in the air 5 feet straight and lope around the so-called lunar surface, then the wires were attached to these little rings.
Yes, and one of them many of you know already. He has his own TFR show and his own YouTube channel. He's been in the community quite some time doing all kinds of good things, and he is Paul from Paul on the Plane. So how you doing, Paul? You with us?
I'm here. Thanks for having me, Bob, and great to be here. Thanks for having me. It's awesome. I'm really excited to talk about this. It's a subject near and dear to my heart.
He's a shill.
He's a shill. Yeah, we heard it straight from you. Okay. And also with Paul today, Paul, this all kind of came about by Paul released a video, well, a couple of video series. You did one with Scott, and you also did one with God, what was the guy's name, Paul? I always who is it?
Archer
Sage. Yeah, I don't know why I keep forgetting his name. But you did a video series with Archer Sage, and basically a whole bunch of forensic analysis of NASA photographs, and the series were just absolutely spot on. They're so good. And then after that, you teamed up with Scott, and Scott Henderson, everybody, is a contributor to an outstanding moon landing debunk website called aulis.com, AULIS.com. We've talked about it several times before on Globebusters, and it's a really good site for just debunking NASA from start to finish. Here we have this particular article right here, Scott Henderson's Apollo Studies 2018, and we're going to be going through a lot of this stuff with him today. So let me go and introduce him. Scott Henderson, how you doing today, Scott?
Very good. Thank you for having me on the show.
We thought what might be kind of a good way to kick this thing off is, the way that when Scott and I first spoke, the way he kind of presented his findings to me was kind of getting me to kind of set the context and be in a position to kind of review the photos and have a right frame of reference. And Scott, maybe you could just do that kind of same thing and talk a little bit about what you've uncovered about the site itself where these pictures were taken, and just how that all came about. Because I think as we go through the photos, then it will, put us in a position to be able to receive them, and it'll make a lot more sense that way. So that's kind of what I was thinking.
Well, that sounds like a good plan. What you have to realize is when NASA started out to go to the moon, that was their intention. Their intention wasn't to do a simulation. So, any film director who set out initially to do a simulation of a moon landing, would have complete control of the set, complete control of the actors, complete control of all the props and lighting effects and any atmospheric effects that they would have. That would be all planned and laid out and done. And of course, if you're going to do a series of 6 of them, you'd be shooting them back to back. Well, NASA initially was going to the moon, and at some point in time, they decided that they couldn't fail. They had to prove that they were a superior nation, in the Cold War. And when they decided to do the simulation, they were using the equipment that NASA had already produced, the sets that they were practicing on, and the props as well, like the lander and the experimental packages and stuff like that. And of course, anyone producing and directing this thing also had to use the astronauts as well. They weren't actors. Okay, and as a matter of fact, any director would want to have complete control of the cameras. Well, they didn't have control of the cameras. The astronauts had control of the cameras as well. And this is what has happened throughout these videos and the photos, that the anomalies are there. The astronauts intentionally wanted to show the fraud. They most likely were doing this for their 3 fallen comrades, the Grissom, Chaffee, and White, and they were documenting this in these photographs. They probably weren't intended to be released to the media at any time. I mean, the initial photographs that were put out there was maybe 2 or 3 dozen for each mission that were put up for magazines, newspapers, and other media events. And these other photographs were just simply archived, tucked away, and 25 years later, NASA wants to keep promoting their moon landing, and they started putting up the photographs online. They digitized them, put them up, and everybody looks at them and says, oh yeah, we landed on the moon. That's not what's in the photographs. What's in the photographs is a very detailed documentation of where it was actually shot, the equipment that was used, that it was the same equipment being used over and over again for all 6 missions when they were filming this. And when they weren't using it, it was just left lying outside on the ground. It's you can see the equipment aging with time through the 6 missions. If you're looking at particularly the experimental equipment, okay? And when it got so bad, then they had to replace it.
Yeah. So let me ask you something, Scott. You know, this is one of the things that I found really fascinating about this is when you look at some of these photographs. I mean, it appears that they're like old cars and old pieces of cars and stuff like that. And you told me something that really kind of blew me away about where NASA had originally set up to do some of these pictures, and that was in Flagstaff, right? And in particular, I believe you said that it was like in a junkyard in Flagstaff. Is that right?
Well, the landfill site's still there today. It's right on the southeast corner of Cinder Lake, and Cinder Lake is the moonscape that NASA recreated on there, and that's where they were doing all the simulations. That's where Farouk Albez was training the astronauts to get their timing down and to familiarize them with the use of the equipment. And it only makes sense that they would use a landfill site if they were going to create something. They already had the big earth-moving equipment there. Nobody would even notice that you're doing anything, even if you're flying over it. It just, it's just big equipment moving dirt around. So it's quite easy to create the set, and it's quite easy to remove it after you're done.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what they did to kind of set this set up is they covered a lot of the stuff with kind of a gray ash type of soil, or a gray colored soil. Is that right? Or how exactly do you think they prepped this to hide most of the debris in the landfill?
Well, they probably used a stone slinger, probably mixed it into a slurry and blended the color of the clay in that they wanted to get the color that they wanted for the moon. And you can see that's covered with that, and some of the rocks that are shown when they're chipped back, they're much whiter underneath. They're either using a plaster coating or a lighter clay. And even if you take a look at Google Earth at Cinder Lake, you can see the landfill site there, and you can see that very white clay in that landfill site. It's still there today.
Wow, that is absolutely amazing.
Might be a good idea, Scott, if you mentioned kind of how you, before we get into the photos, another kind of, I think, interesting point was, how many hours you have spent, to get to this point. This isn't something, somebody jumping online, scrolling through photos in an afternoon, you're not going to see this stuff. It obviously is hours and hours and hours of time. So how did you, I thought it was interesting, how did you get into?
Well, I was looking after my parents as they aged, as they got older, and when it became time that I had to be up all night long to monitor them, especially my father, who was very tipsy for a number of years, and I just sat up and I had a monitor on him, and I had to find something quiet to do. And I've always been interested in NASA and space and everything else, and I was basically on the NASA server and reading through most of their documents on there, all of their server reports on all their tests and trials of equipment. And then I got into the photographs, and when I started to find a few small things, I became more and more interested. And when I really found some solid evidence, I was intrigued, and I had to keep looking to see what else there was there, and eventually put together just exactly what the astronauts were doing, because they're the ones taking the photographs, and they're the ones that are showing it to you.
Very much.
And each pair of astronauts have their own methods on how they present the stuff. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were very subtle in how they presented it. They simply made some nice clean shots of it, and by the time you got to Apollo 12, I mean, they're literally pointing it out. The surveyor itself, even in the cuff checklists, they're required to photograph it, wipe it with their finger, and then rephotograph it again. And you'll see that in there. And the reason they do that on the surveyor is because the piece of machinery is 100% clean as a whistle, all except for the panoramic mirror. Back that one up to the must-see video where I've made that little plate up. Right there.
Oh, let's see. Okay, more 2C rocks. All right.
Yeah. Now look underneath Paul's name.
What is that?
Exactly. It's dead.
It looks like a dead something.
It's dead. I don't know if they made it up as a plaster mold and made it look like a dead animal, or it's a real dead animal.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what that is. It's
That's why I put it on that. That's why I put that one up there.
Very interesting.
Yeah. This thing you don't see.
Now this one's interesting because it appears that there's a Labatt's beer can, and this takes me back to there was a lady in Australia that went basically ballistic because she spotted a Coke bottle, I believe,
rolling across the set.
Yeah, on the set. And she's like, wait a minute, what is a Coke bottle doing on the moon, right? And
apparently that can is too vague for some people to see. I saw that in one of the comments.
That it's too big?
Vague.
Oh, vague.
Not clear enough
Yeah.
to see.
Well,
yeah, this is
Looks like it can
obviously
to me.
it's magnified big time. You know, this is obviously how the shot looked. It was you could see in the top left how small the object was in the original photo. So when you magnify it, it's going to be distorted. But it does appear to have a sheen to it. It seems to be somewhat metallic in nature of some sort. So it doesn't look like a moon rock to me. So
No footprints around it.
And
no, it does look like some sort of a can. It may not be this particular Labatt's beer can, but I mean, like I said, a lot of these things are pretty unmistakable. You know, like when the lady saw the Coke bottle, for one. I thought what was interesting was like the footage of the cars and the old, I don't know what, 58 or 57 Corvette, that you can see very clearly the front grill part of that, and then the back end of it, which has a very distinct line to it, you know, that would appear to be buried under the sun. I think Paul's probably going to pull this one up. I mean, I looked at that and went, wow, that's incredible. And initially, I didn't see it, but then, this is the one that's way in the background.
I like that one too.
Yeah. But yeah, you look at some of these things and yeah, landfill, junkyard, this very much, I mean, you can definitely see, there it is. I mean, to me, that is a dead giveaway, especially the rear. The back part of it is such a giveaway. And you can see that, you know, that front part of it. And it
you know what it looks like?
The whole stretch. What?
You know what it looks like? It looks like there's just spray on like industrial insulation. So like if you're building a hospital or something, like certain floors, like entire ceilings, yeah. Like it sprays on with the thing that like sticks, and that's exactly what it looks like.
That's not the only car in that photo.
There's several.
Full of them. There's more down. I just pulled the one up to show. Right. There's all kinds of stuff. That's the same crater that Ancient Aliens pulled up the robot head or whatever.
Oh yeah, the one that looked like C-3PO.
Head, and right in front of it, there's a work belt sitting on that thing. I sent you a shot of the work belt.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw the one with C-3PO, the C-3PO head. And, you know, absolutely blown away at that because now that, I'm not sure, that looks like an old Indian head or something, yeah.
It's painted.
Yeah.
Okay. And you see how the astronauts have shown it to you? Right off the top of the handle?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and if you want to go looking for stuff, just let the astronauts point it out to you.
Yep. Now, obviously, I'm sure a lot of people will come back and say, wow, you guys over at Globebusters really have a vivid imagination seeing all this stuff in this. But, you know, to that, I would say maybe to some degree, you have to stretch your imagination a little bit. But then there's other stuff that is so blatantly wrong and that cannot be denied that, you know, at this point, I think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that what we're seeing here was not shot on the moon. And, you know, the likelihood of it being shot in a landfill is exponentially higher, especially with all the rain, mud, alternator parts, old cars. I mean, you know, what makes more sense ultimately when you really get past the idea that we are being deceived here and what we're being shown here is a load of bollocks, then suddenly it's not such a stretch of the imagination. When you put it in perspective and realize where NASA was shooting this stuff. And they were using this stuff for training shots, right?
Yep. Exactly. That's where they were doing all their training.
Mm-hmm. Which, again, still floors me, you know. But I suppose that if I were NASA and I wanted to keep it as inconspicuous as possible, I would probably do something like that. It's kind of like, you know, I don't know if you saw this or not, Scott, but Jaron, about 2 years ago, was looking around at a place up in Canada called Devon Island, and was just kind of looking around all over the place, and first thing he finds is some vehicles, and looks like they've got NASA stickers all over them, and then lo and behold...
Maybe you should tell him it was like on Google Earth. He wasn't actually there.
Yeah. No, he wasn't always there, or already there. It was on Google Earth. But the fact that came up there was pretty amazing. And then, of course, all the fanboys come back and say, well, obviously that's where they do all their training. And it's like, why? What resemblance other than terrestrially does Devon Island have to Mars?
That's where that road comes from.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy. And thank you so much for coming on today and talking about this. And everybody, Paul, let everybody know all the videos that you and Scott did together are on your channel and on that playlist, or let them know what they need to know.
Yeah, all of them are available on my YouTube channel. It's just Paul on the Plane, and put together in a quick little playlist. So there's 7 so far, and hopefully, if Scott's willing, we can collaborate on a few more here in the near future. I would like that a lot.
Yeah, super. Scott, do you have anything else that you want to share on this that you want people to take a look at?
Well, I think we've pretty much covered everything. We got enough interest with people to take a closer look at the photographs. I mean, just about any photograph you pull up, there's something in there to be seen. There really aren't any random photos out there. I mean, I've spent thousands of hours studying them, and when I see them displayed now, or somebody's trying to debunk them or whatever, and I just look at them and I see what the problem is with the photograph, it's just hilarious, But
yeah, so
I just hope everybody takes a look at the videos we put up and the photos that I have at Allis.com. David Percy and Mary Bennett, very kind to put the photographs up for me. He spent quite a bit of time helping me do the color plates up and make sure that they were clear and easy to understand.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, Scott, obviously you have got tens of thousands of hours in looking at the Apollo missions and kind of going through the stills and the video footage and all that. Are you continuing that on at this point and looking at ISS footage, and
Orion
things?
Oh yes.
Excellent.
Oh, yes, all of that. I've looked through all the documentation for everything right back through from the late 1950s on with it, and Orion is just amazing, and it takes a long time to understand how they present the documents. Like if they're talking about radiation and you're reading a document for an hour or so and they're talking about rads per hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then all the graphs are per minute.
Yeah.
And you don't realize that you're reading that. So, the numbers are down, it's only 0.05 this or whatever, right? Well, it's per minute. Right? You multiply it by 60. Right? And Orion, I've read it through everything, and there was one little asterisk on it, and it said, this is by this simulation software. Right? Mm-hmm. For all the graphics and charts that they do on it. It's not the actual radiation numbers that they so-called collected on it.
Yep.
And at no time has NASA ever given a radiation number from outside the craft.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Considering which radiation they're supposed to be.
Right, and then so how do you know how well the craft is protecting it?
Yeah, well, I don't think with a few layers of aluminum foil it's protecting much of anything. and it even admitted by NASA that it's very kind of shoddily built. They're built with foil and things that obviously not lead, like you would not even anything as heavy as a lead apron that you would get put over you at the dentist's office. So yeah, they some things it's just better for them simply to not address at all. Otherwise, they wind up burning themselves because they do. Every time they open their mouth and they start talking about something, they get burned on it because, then we turn it around and say, well, what's going on with this then? So I think that they really need to be very careful and very selective about what they say. A very interesting topic, to say the least, Scott. So, do you make YouTube videos, or I don't even know if you have a channel, or how do you
No, I don't.
work? Okay,
No,
through Allus.
At the moment, just the only stuff I have up is on the Allus site and what Paul and I have done.
Okay.
I've been on the air with Marcus Allen a couple of times.
Okay. All right. Well, I was just curious if somebody wanted to find your work. Otherwise, but
the website's out of Clearview, Florida. It's Let's Talk Radio with Todd Bates.
Let's Talk Radio. Okay. I will put that in the show notes for everybody so people can go back and hear your other interviews and some of the other stuff that you've covered. But you're doing some great work, Scott, and it's fascinating. And, I don't know where you find the patience to pour through tens of thousands of hours worth of, video and photographs and stuff. But obviously, it is kind of compelling, when you realize you're onto a bunch of frauds. It kind of, I guess, gives you a little motivation, right?
Well, when you find something, we didn't actually cover the one with the pile of dirt with the gloves in it. When I found that one, I had about the same reaction as Bart Zabrell when he describes finding, when he realized he was sitting with the footage in his household and how dangerous it could be. I mean, I was sitting for about an hour just with my heart racing going, oh my God, look what I found. Right?
Yeah.
And then I really knew what I was looking for. Right? Mm-hmm. And then hundreds of things.
Yeah, I know the feeling. A little over 2 years ago, or about 2 years ago, we were doing an ISS show on Globebusters, and it was one of those times when we were watching the ISS, and they started doing a pan from left to right, and we're just going, oh, come on, don't tell me they're going to actually show a 360 pan, and we're getting all excited watching it, and we pan, and the Earth, it goes all the way across the Earth. It keeps panning, the Earth is completely out of the picture, and we're just in utter amazement going, oh my God, are they going to pan around to show outer space? And the next thing we know, it keeps panning, and here comes the Earth right back into the frame again, right? Yeah. It continuing on in the same direction. Blew us all away. But that's one of those finds that you're just like, oh, wow, NASA really blew it.
I went through the photographs in chronological order. So by the time I got to Apollo 17, I studied each of the astronauts as well, so I understood their character, their home life, how they interacted between each other, that kind of thing. So I knew exactly the type of characters they were going in there, and it wasn't very long that I'm sitting looking at it going, oh my God, these guys are just playing in the mud. Mm-hmm. Right? And there's a wet flag, and then I realized that 45 years and nobody has seen this thing as wet.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, sometimes
I call it the Emperor's New Clothing Syndrome.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of like that story.
It's exactly what it is.
Yep. There's kind of a story that, they talk about the Native Americans supposedly had never seen ships before, and there's this story out there that when they had come near the shore, the natives could not see them because they had never seen anything like that before. It never entered their paradigm. And in a way, that's kind of true. It really takes a fresh perspective sometimes for something to come out that a whole room full of people can miss. And then there's that one unique individual that, looks at things just a little different. And it's like, oh my God, how did we miss that? So, gotta love it.
well, that's the thing is, when the original researchers were starting out, okay, they were using their own personal knowledge or skills and looking at the information okay, and you have somebody that has knowledge of the rockets and everything else, and you know, Bill Casing comes up with it and he says these things couldn't fly. He looks at the photographs and say that couldn't happen, right? There's no blast crater. This couldn't happen. That couldn't happen. It should have been a done deal right then.
Yeah.
Okay.
It should have been, but
and then it follows up with Ralph Renee and James Collier and everybody else coming onto it. Even Marcus Allen sits down, and I do know Marcus Allen. His expertise with the cameras.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talked to him, and he said, "Well, I had a dozen photographs."
Yeah.
You know, and they were airbrushed in for magazine quality, whatever. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Me, I have the entire internet. I have entire NASA to draw from. I have every photograph available. Right?
Yep.
And what I did is I kept to myself because people were saying, "Oh, look at this guy, look at this guy's research, and look at that guy's research." And I said, if I do that, I won't be on my own. I'll be looking at what they did. Right?
Yep.
I looked at it after.
Yep.
After my decision.
Yep.
And that was the main thing. Like some of the stuff I found, other people have found, but I would have missed it if I had just been chasing, little anomalies and strange-looking rocks and shadows.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So, all right. Well, anyway, all right. Well, I guess we're gonna probably wrap this thing up then, Scott. But yeah, just superb work, and I'd like to have you on again in the future sometime. Maybe go over some of your new stuff, or maybe some more stuff that you have, because I think it's fascinating, and you're one of the guys that is putting in an immense amount of time doing this, and I really appreciate your point of view.
Well, thank you for having me on. Be more than happy to come back. Paul and I will probably do another series when he gets up on the next one. That'd be a good time to bring us back on and do it. I'm old enough. I don't need to start learning how to do my own videos. Right?
I hear you. I feel the same way.
And I look at the photographs. I look at the photographs, and people say, "Oh, why don't you do this with them and that, and photo negatives and up the contrast and everything else?" It's either in the photograph or it's not, right? I'm not going to study the format of it. Those are other professionals can do that, right?
Yep.
Looking at the photographic structure, I'm just looking at what's in the photograph and why that photograph was taken.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you do a great job at it too.
The moon is a unique body. There is no place on Earth that offers a topography quite like it. Certainly, the Earth has features similar to those on the lunar surface. But nowhere is the Earth cratered to the extent and in the same manner as the surface of the moon. Where can men go to test and practice the exploration techniques being developed for Apollo landings? The United States Geological Survey decided to build a model of one part of the lunar surface in an area accessible to present research centers. Examining a multitude of lunar photographs taken by the orbiter satellites, survey scientists choose proposed Apollo landing site 2P6 in the southwest part of Mare Tranquillitatis as a representative area and one that would be profitable to reproduce. Where to build it? Near Flagstaff, Arizona, are fields of volcanic cinders, the result of eruptions about the year 1065. The cinders provide an excellent material to recreate the lunar surface, and the geologic structure will offer training in mapping and sampling for astronauts. Craters on the lunar photos have been carefully examined and their relative ages charted. All the craters are separated into 3 major age categories, from oldest to youngest. Of the 426 craters larger than 2 meters across that can be seen on the photos, 354 are among the oldest, 61 are of intermediate age, and 11 appear to have been formed recently. An area covering over 268,000 square meters is chosen and fenced off, and construction of the crater field begins. First, the ground is prepared by dragging to clear away the underbrush and to produce as smooth an original surface as possible. It will be important not only that the craters are reproduced in the same size and approximate age relationships as on the lunar surface, but that the material ejected from them creates a surface similar to that on the moon. So all the existing bumps and irregularities are smoothed out. Then a surveying team carefully locates the center point of each crater visible on the orbiter photographs, and stakes are driven to mark the position. Each stake is color-coded so that the craters of the 3 different ages can be identified. Finally, all the craters have been positioned and marked as old, intermediate, or young in age. Placing explosives in holes at the right location and blowing them in the right order to match the age sequence is not all that is required to recreate a portion of the moon's surface. The composition of the cinder and clay material is carefully studied to determine what size charges to use and how deep to bury them, so that each crater will be, as nearly as possible, the same size as its lunar counterpart. After weeks of study and calculation, these values have been computed for each of the 426 craters. We are ready to dig the holes. As the backhoe slices into the ground, it exposes the variety of materials that make up the cinder lake. Cinders from nearby craters have fallen over the area at different times. Between some of these pyroclastic episodes, brown clay was deposited. The result is layers of clay and layers of cinder from different eruptions. In some places, the cinders fill pockets in the clay. Great care is taken to dig the holes at precisely the depth calculated by the explosives expert. As the appropriate depth for each charge is reached, the last few scoops are removed one at a time, and measurements taken between scoops. Now that the different layers of geologic units are exposed by the backhoe, a geologist can conduct a detailed stratigraphic study in the deepest of the charge holes. The result of his study will be a control on geologic traverses conducted here. During most testing of lunar procedures, the test subjects have not previously studied the area. Besides testing techniques and tools, they attempt to define the geologic formations in the region. So this geologist carefully describes the different layers, their thickness, their composition, a valuable check on the accuracy of the test subject's geologic analysis. Not only are we creating an area that very closely resembles a portion of the lunar surface, but an area which should present geologic problems analogous to those an astronaut will encounter on the moon. Once the geologist has completed his work, the final preparation of the field for explosions can be made. 426 holes await the emplacement of explosives. Boosters are prepared, which will be used to set off bags of nitrocarbonitrate. Each hole is loaded with a size charge calculated to create just the right size crater. The bags of explosives are positioned with care and the boosters inserted. Primer cord is attached to the boosters and held out of the way while the hole is filled. One after another, all the charges are laid, even though different craters will be fired at different times. 426 explosive charges, 426 craters in the same position and of the same size as one part of the moon's surface, if the amount of explosive has been correctly calculated, if the depth of each crater is correct, if the surveyors have accurately reproduced the crater positions. Finally, all the explosive charges are in place, and the holes have been covered over. Once more, the field is dragged back and forth until it is smooth again. All that can be seen are stakes marking the position of the primer cords. One by one, 354 of the charges are tied together and the stakes removed. These will be exploded first. The ejecta and debris will spread out over the surface to be covered by later explosions, and so they will represent the oldest craters in one part of the moon. Primer cord is a unique firing device. Connecting all the charges to the firing box, it burns with such speed that a piece of it laid across the country would burn out in Los Angeles only 13 minutes after it was lit in New York. One after another, all the charges to be fired in the first shot are tied together. Several months have gone by since this area was selected and fenced off. Hundreds of man-hours have gone into the calculations and careful preparation for firing. And now we are ready. Give us 354 old-age craters.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire!
Now we need 61 craters of intermediate age. Here's the same detonation recorded by high-speed cameras rolling at 5,000 frames per second. They show the primer cord tracing paths to each of the 61 shot holes. Later, the 11 youngest craters are exploded. As each set of craters has scattered debris over the surface, we have created an altogether new geologic area, with the oldest ejecta on the bottom and the newest on top. In some places, the original layers of cinder and clay have been completely turned over. We have changed a rolling cinder field into a crater field. But how closely does it match the topography of lunar site 2P6? This is the orbiter photograph of the lunar surface. And this is an aerial photograph of the new crater field. The size and location of each of the 426 craters have been reproduced with remarkable accuracy. On this crater field, astronauts will be able to train in a more realistic setting. a setting like the lunar surface. A little of Mare Tranquillitatis here in Flagstaff, Arizona.